It's finally getting more national as well as local attention, but opiate addiction, whether by needle injection or from popping pills, is a deadly and growing threat. Here with us now to talk about some possible solutions to the danger of drug overdoses are two of the people we just saw featured in the video.
Yeah, we want to welcome Van Asher from St. Anne's Corner of Harm Reduction. Welcome to BK Live and in person.
Thank you.
Pulled you out of the TV screen. And from the nonprofit organization where our team actually shot that video, Vocal, that's Voices of Community Activists and Leaders. We also want to welcome their Director of Program Services, Evelyn Milan. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for being in that video and sharing some of this knowledge, because for a lot of us, that's the first time that we ever heard of fentanyl. So just break down what the poor man's definition of fentanyl is for me.
Well, fentanyl is a synthetic opioid that's most commonly used for putting people under for surgery. It's used for pain treatment. There's a lot of fentanyl patches, which is a time release.
Gotcha.
That people had initially started using to draw that out and inject. And there's also fentanyl in a powder form, which is what we're seeing now, which is creating the overdose epidemic that we're up against.
Okay, so how did this sort of epidemic come about, and how do we find ourselves in the throes of it?
Well, one of the things is that, people that have been using pain medication for a long time are now addicted to pain medication, right? Opiates, which we have the Vicodin, we have the OxyContin, and others. So unfortunately, when the doctor says you can't use any more of these medications because either the insurance doesn't pay for it or it's time just to take you off because by law, that's what it is, then the person is not really referred to a detox. They're like, that's it, your time is up, and you're not getting any more medication. So what happens is they need pain medication. So heroin is like the perfect pain medication, right? So they're able to go out there, and it's a lot cheaper to buy heroin than to buy OxyContin in the street, which is going to cost you it could cost you up to $15 a pill. So heroin is a lot cheaper. The thing is that now, because fentanyl is in the scene, people are cutting the heroin with fentanyl. So fentanyl is up to 100 times more potent than morphine.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's easy to get it into the States. So it's become like a wave.
So this is, Van, I wanted to go to you because we hear lots of people in the middle of America, right to our backyard here in Brooklyn, talking about this opioid outbreak, and it's an epidemic. But what we might actually be facing is a fentanyl epidemic.
Yeah, clearly. And fentanyl is an opioid. And part of the thing is also, I'm sure it's not just coming in from other places. It's simple chemicals that can be made on our home turf. So that cuts out having to smuggle it.
Gotcha.
And so much, it's also cheaper than heroin. So if I were to buy a kilo of fentanyl to distribute and cut up, the profit margin is so much greater. That we're going to see, this is unfortunately going to become the new norm. And last year there were 55,403 fatal opioid-related overdoses in the United States. And we are coming up with this as a harm reduction initiative, so that number doesn't raise by one.
You said a harm reduction initiative, but why do these sort of deaths from fentanyl happen in waves?
Well, and I'm not sure if it's so much. I was talking to Evelyn about this before. I'm not sure if it's so much a wave as more of like a tsunami we're seeing, where it's in the food stream basically. It's just going to be everywhere. We want these strips, and everyone's making the assumption that it's the best assumption to make sure that your dope already has fentanyl in it. But these strips, you can determine if there is. Unfortunately, they don't tell you a percentage, but then you can maybe inject a little less if you're going to inject, or go a little slower to prevent an overdose.
Okay, well, you have everything sort of right here in front of you from the overdose rescue kit. Can you tell us what's incorporated?
Sure.
Okay. So we have our fentanyl strips. Here we have our one shot, which is you have your cooker, your syringe, and everything.
The bag you're opening, that's something that someone could encounter at an exchange?
Right, at a syringe exchange. And it comes already ready. This is like for one use, you get rid of it. And we also have 10 packs for people that are going to be using more than one syringe, but injecting more than one time. So we have our our cap, which is called the cooker, right? With the content, it already comes prepared. So when the person is getting ready to use, what they do is they are able to mix their drug, draw it up
Into the syringe.
into the syringe,
Yeah.
right? So, and we have here water,
Right.
Okay.
right? So, put the water in.
Now, I noticed in the video that we saw that you actually train and walk people through it.
Right. So that's really important because we want people to do this right. What the person's going to do once they have their drug ready, they're going to draw it up,
Right.
right? They're going to cover it up, cover the syringe, and then you could take the next step.
Other way.
Yeah, I can't.
Yeah. She doesn't have her glasses on.
Sorry.
No,
But so then we're going to hold that right there. Now comes time to test what's in the cooker.
So now let's say my cooker is empty. I'll add a little water because I just want to test the residue. I
Yeah.
can take the strip out, and I want to make sure.
And it's enough to just test the residue, like we
Yep.
were saying.
These
It's
are
not
initially
like you stick
intended-
it in your cook and wait and churn it.
How did you find out about this?
Well, I was talking with a friend of mine who had been arrested for drug trafficking. And when he was released, he went back to his home state and was living on Cape Cod. And he opened some three-quarter houses, some sober houses for people just getting out of jail or out of treatment. And there's such a rush of overdose on the Cape that he was drug testing. And he told me people were actually seeking out fentanyl there, which we're not seeing as much in New York because a lot of the screenings for parole or for certain jobs weren't looking for fentanyl. But because it's so much more powerful, people were overdosing. So that made me think of the idea of, well, maybe we should start testing since it's something we're seeing. And then doing research, I found out that safer injection facility in Vancouver called Insight had already done this. So I made sure I got the same strips. I spoke with them about how they were using them.
Yeah.
And
them the strip.
started. And this is the strip, which you guys saw in the
Hold it
video.
from the
You want to
blue
hold it by
ends.
the blue.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you want to just dip it and hold it for about 15 seconds, and it'll just absorb enough that you'll get a result. And this, we're going to, I'm sure, see a negative result
Yeah.
because it's just water.
Which is the two
So-
lines.
Yeah.
So Evelyn, this is just another tool in the process that you guys. It's like harm reduction.
Harm reduction.
So explain to us why harm reduction is the preferred method, because I know there are people who are shouting at the TV saying, "I don't want to spend $1 more on anything with these junkies." Like,
well,
why should they?
that's probably not one of their children. That's why
Well,
they're saying
until
that.
it is.
Until
So
it is,
explain to us
unfortunately.
about the concept of harm reduction.
Well, the harm reduction is we're going to meet this drug user where he's at, right? I can't change nobody's mind.
Right.
But what I can do is educate them, and they could become empowered and know how to use safely. So one of the things about fentanyl is that fentanyl is a quicker high. So once they inject, they're going to feel a lot quicker. It's going to be a lot deeper. But
Hence the buddy system too.
that's so important.
Yeah.
That's one of the things we talk about. Is you're going to test your drug after you load up your shot. You have a choice to make. If it comes back positive, so hopefully you have someone that you can say, listen, I'm gonna
your
take care of
brakes.
myself. If you don't hear from me, watch out for me. You know, come and be, you know, by my side. Important thing, have Narcan, naloxone. Okay. So you want to have the naloxone, but the naloxone alone is not gonna do nothing for you because if you're out, you can't take care of yourself.
So help us out. The naloxone, we've all seen Pulp Fiction. Like you go
okay.
stabbing into someone's chest and like, is
Yeah.
that the reality
I
of the
think
situation?
Van would like
What's
that,
the best
but-
way?
I was going to say, I was an EMT and I had wished that was the case.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's Hollywood.
Yeah.
Naloxone, what you want to do is there are different ways you can administer it. There's a intranasal administration
yeah.
or intermuscular.
Okay.
And the intermuscular, you'll want to put in the shoulder or the thigh.
Okay.
And the needle's big enough it could go through a jacket or anything.
Gotcha.
And the beautiful thing about this drug, it's going to reverse an opioid overdose, but if it's not an opioid overdose, it's not going to do any harm to the person.
Gotcha.
Okay, that's huge. Can you tell us a little bit about the economics of the urine test strips and the difference it can make in the life of somebody who's overdosing?
Sure. Well, I mean, if we look at a cost analysis breakdown, if I use the naloxone, that's $30 to $60. But if I call 911 after, which they suggest, and I was an EMT and I was also a dispatcher, that phone call is going to be an average of $150 to $200, depending on if EMT basics or paramedics arrive at the scene. There's also, you have to pay the person who answered that call and the dispatcher. There's the triage nurse. Then there's the doctor in the ER. And if you're injecting, they're often going to put you on a saline drip because you may be dehydrated. So that $30 to $60 cost, at the end, you could receive a bill that's closer to $8,500. The strips, if I used one for each and every time I injected, and I was injecting 3 or 4 times like the median injector we're seeing is, that would be $1,100 a year. So actually, it's a lot of people are saying, well, $1 strip is expensive, but in the grand scheme of things, it's less than a coffee at Starbucks a day.
What are the issues that you're finding because the urine test strips weren't specifically made for this? You know, what are the problems that you're having getting access to it?
Well, there's no problem getting access. I mean, they could just be ordered through a site. We're not finding support with some of the local agencies because they're not FDA approved. So the next step will be just having a study done, and there's some researchers we've spoken to that are looking into doing that, so they can then prove their efficiency in a lab, and then we'll be able to get more support.
So is the political will there? Because I know we've been watching the back and forth with Congress for the last 30 years just about needle exchange programs and who's going to pay and how much they're going to pay, whether it's going to be for staffing or for needles or what responsibility the state has. So as we sit here in New York, is there a political will to move forward with this? We know Jersey, Christie is putting money into this issue, but how are we doing in New York?
Well, in New York, I mean, it's always been a political hotbed regarding HIV and injectors. And when there was a response, it actually, prevention costs less than treatment is the bottom line. In the early 90s, there were when I got involved in this field, there were 250,000 injectors in New York City, and 54% were estimated to be HIV positive. By making sterile syringes accessible, that number has been cut down to below 3% and is held there since 2012. So on that same note, using that same thing, by making tools available to prevent HIV, if we make tools available to help prevent overdose, then cost-wise it's going to be so much less. I mean, I know so many cities across America.
And saving money.
Yeah, and so many cities across America right now, their morgues are past capacity. And they're having to use storage containers outside, like in Ohio currently, because of the opioid overdose, which is fentanyl related.
And besides that, you know what? This is someone's child. The sad thing is that if we don't take care of this, more of our people are going to be dying. More mothers are going to be receiving that phone call. More families are disrupted. The children no longer have a father or someone that's been financially taking care of the house. You know, regular people, these are regular people. They're our people.
And one thing I'm trying to do is reach out to street-level drug dealers because they're going to be targeted, but they often don't know what's in their product because, let's say, you put a package on the street, sold it to him, sold it to her, sold it to me, and now I'm distributing it. Someone may have stepped on it along the way and added fentanyl in it and stretched it out. Of course. Not necessarily me.
But no one's half the battle.
Exactly.
I think we are completely out of time. Thank you so much for the amazing work that you do.
Thank you for having us.
And we want to have you back again soon, all right?
Excellent. Cheers.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.